Chapter 3, Drawing Through Forms. Okay, so for this chapter, we're going to talk about really taking our time with the forms and really trying to get them to draw through. So just like last week, I want you to get some tracing paper if you're doing this traditionally, or you can use Photoshop and treat it just like tracing paper would. Now for this, if you're using Photoshop, I have a little tip. So besides taking the opacity of the image layer and just bringing it down, now another method you can do is create a completely new layer on top, and you're going to go to Edit, Fill, or for my shortcut it's Shift 5. You can pick a color, and I'm just going to make it white. Hit OK. Now what this does is I have a completely white image over here, and I'm going to treat it like tracing paper. So tracing paper is transparent, so I'm going to lower the opacity like so, maybe about 40%. So it's almost like I have a layer of tracing paper. So I'm just going to name it tracing paper. But instead of drawing on the tracing paper, any sort of line I draw on here will also be fairly transparent. So I need to make another layer. You can call this a drawing layer. So it'll be a little bit more solid. Okay. So onto the actual drawing. Now from here, we're going to take each of these images and trace them like we did last week when we did shapes. But what we're going to do is really practice those forms like we learned in the previous chapters. So this is a fairly basic image with a lot of geoforms. First thing I like to do is try to get the area with the line on the back. So it's a fairly long line. Do my best to try to capture that. So even if you're doing this in tracing paper with graphite, I definitely want you to do your best to try to get the line in the background, just so we know where the table is versus the background. Next, it's a good idea to start with the largest forms. So from here, I'm going to take this line. This is the most obvious. And draw these accordingly. So again, even though this is week 3, we still want to make sure we're building good habits, connecting our lines with dots and really just building as much as we can. Now, the principle of drawing through is basically drawing parts of the image that is invisible. Right? So instead of stopping here with the yellow object where the cube ends, we're going to draw all the way through like so. And as simple as drawing through is, it's often neglected in even more advanced courses from a lot of students. Especially for those that are really into figure drawing, drawing characters. This is what's going to make or break, how much depth you have in the forms you draw. So even though we're tracing, again, you want to really assess what's happening with the forms here. Now this form is a little bit tricky, right? It's almost like a half cylinder that's cut off. So here, I really have to think about how the bottom looks. And it's more of like a square. right? Like a bottom of a cube. But it starts with and ends with a curve as well. Okay. Now moving on to some of these other forms. So this is more of a triangle. So when you're drawing these, you kind of have to pretend they're made out of glass and really try to imagine how it looks from a different angle. So this will be the difference between someone who just blindly traces or copies this image without really thinking it through. So this will be a very simple warm-up in understanding these forms. So these are one of the things I'll take a look at in your assignments if you're just ending the image like this. But I really want you guys to draw through as much as you can. So from here, what's missing will be the line connecting on the other side. Okay. Now if you look here at this red object, it's basically a giant rectangular form or a long box. So from here, a lot of it's really covered up. So I really want to make sure I get my line straight to try to find where it connects with the rest of the image. So this line is an indication of the direction of the perspective, right? So I want to make that line as parallel as I can on the bottom. So if I do something like this, I know it's going to be way off, right? I want to make it as the same angle as I can. And that'll help me get these lines. Okay. Same thing here. Find this angle, and then this one that we don't see. Connecting them all the way through. And then now we have that box. So what's left for me are these rounded objects, such as these two cones and the cylinder. There isn't really a right or wrong order in which of these forms you do first. I just wanted to tackle the ones with the straighter lines. If you need to, you can work in multiple layers. That way when you erase something here, it doesn't affect the other lines. And you could do this traditionally as well. If you need to work on multiple tracing paper pages, that might help as well. So from here, when I'm drawing this ellipse, things could get a little bit messy. Okay, so I'm going to block it in really quick. Trying to get that ellipse. Now drawing ellipses in Photoshop freehand can be a lot trickier with a stylus, even if you have a Cintiq. If you have a tablet, it's definitely a lot more difficult. But I'm kind of going back in here to just fix that up a little, clean it up.